Apple, I just checked my calendar and it's not April 1st, so if this is a joke, I'm waiting for the punchline. No, but honestly, I did not want to spend this entire video ranting, but I think that is what this is going to be because I sincerely do not understand the purpose, the place, and the necessity of the M2 iPad Pro. I barely understood the necessity of the M1 iPad Pro, and I feel like if you bought the 2018 iPad Pro, you should probably become an investor or a stockbroker because you have the best eye for value in the world. But I'll do my best to offer some actual purchasing advice in this video because I know a lot of people might be in need of a new iPad and they were waiting for the release of this one. Some people might still be using some older iPads that they would like to upgrade, so stick around for the purchasing advice and which iPad I think would be best for you in 2022. But before we do that, I have a few words for Apple. Apple already made a very questionable decision with the M1 iPad Pro of last year, seeing as there wasn't really anything special about the device except for the M1 chip, which you could not even take full advantage of. So it's no surprise that I, as well as a lot of other people, aren't too excited about the M2 iPad Pro, because Apple did the exact same thing again. No, I'm not saying the M2 iPad is entirely useless because I know there are about 5 or 6 people out there who actually need some specialist apps that are very graphically intensive. Maybe you're a 3D artist or an architect, then sure, you might want to go for the M2 iPad Pro. But for the others that are pretty much just looking for a normal Apple tablet, there are so many other options that offer you way better value for your money. And stay with me because we're definitely going to take a look at all those other options. But first, we need to address this major from Apple. I know for certain that a lot of people aren't going to like what I have to say in this video, most especially Apple. And I will most likely never get an Apple device early because of this video. But unlike some of the bigger YouTubers out there, I am not worried about staying in Apple's good graces. I am dedicated to telling you the truth. You know what? Let's actually talk about that. I mean, I don't necessarily blame them because if Apple is sending you a product early, you have the privilege of using it and making your video before everyone else. And that's a big advantage. You're not necessarily going to want to be 100% honest if there were some bad decisions that were made with the device, or there were some bad aspects which you don't particularly like about the device. But then there are some smaller YouTubers out there who Apple has never and will probably never send a device to for free. I am one of those people, so I don't have any incentive to not tell you the truth. And that is what I'm going to do. Tell you the truth, uncut, uncensored, raw. Just the way it is. So when you're watching the big boys and big girls review the M2 iPad Pro in a couple of days, just take whatever they're saying with a handful of salt because not everything may be as it appears. Now, don't get me wrong. The M1 iPad Pro was a beast of a machine. The hardware was very, very impressive. It was arguably the most powerful device you could get in that form factor. However, being powerful and having a ton of specs doesn't necessarily mean you are the most useful, as was the case with the M1 iPad Pro. And with the M2 iPad Pro, I think Apple is employing the same strategy. Some people might call it pouring old juice in new bottles, and it's pretty difficult to argue with that logic. I know of someone who traded their iPhone 13 Pro Max for an iPhone 14 Plus, and if you really know a lot about these two devices, you will know that that person made a pretty big mistake. And that is what the Apple model kind of does to you. It makes you feel like the newer device is much better than what you currently have. Meanwhile, you're just paying more for what is essentially the same thing. The folks at Apple did what they do best, and they used some incredible marketing, some deceptive words, and some pretty visuals to convince people last year that the M1 iPad Pro was finally going to be the device that could be a laptop and a tablet all in one. Unfortunately, that turned out to be false. But to be honest, a laptop is a laptop, a tablet is a tablet, and never the two shall meet. Or at least that is Apple's perspective regarding this entire matter. And that kind of makes sense because if they made the iPads capable of everything the MacBook could do, then who would buy a MacBook? But then that raises the question, why does Apple keep making these super high-end iPads with the M1 or M2 chip inside of them, telling people they're going to have access to pro apps and then leaving them with a super powerful, super expensive iPad that does not have access to any pro apps and doesn't even come with a calculator installed? You can't even use all the extra memory that it has. And the chipset, while powerful, is kind of limited because most apps aren't even optimized to take full advantage of all that power. If you really want a tablet that is arguably better suited for productivity and can function as a laptop in certain instances, then you might have better luck taking a look at the Galaxy Tab S8 Ultra. My good friend Alex has made several videos on that device, so you can check some of them out. And if you weren't really paying attention to what was going on with the iPad Pro last year, Apple showed off video editing, they showed off some amazing software features, they showed off people playing games with the PlayStation 5 controller, and they packaged this device to seem like the end-all be-all for all tablets. And I mean, if you actually spent all the money to purchase an M1 iPad Pro and all you got was the ability to use LumaFusion and Procreate, I don't think your purchase was particularly justified, especially when considering all the potential use cases that were shown in the presentation. I mean, this isn't really anything new. You could do this on the 2018 iPad Pro with no issues at all. So the M1 chip was not really necessary for what you eventually got with the M1 iPad Pro. One thing to consider when it comes to devices like the M1 or maybe even the M2 iPad Pro is the fact that irrespective of how much great hardware you have, if the software isn't optimized to take full advantage of that hardware, the hardware just goes to waste. A lot of the apps could not take advantage of the extra memory that was available on the M1 iPad Pro, and even connecting to an external monitor via Stage Manager had its issues and still has some issues that are being addressed. And one thing about Apple is the fact that they will always want to do things differently or find a special and new way to do something that already exists. And while that isn't bad in itself, sometimes it makes things unnecessarily complicated and it translates to a worse user experience for the users. Stage Manager, for example, could serve to be a little more like Samsung DeX without any fancy bells or whistles, but something that just works reliably every single time you need to use it. And I know they are fundamentally different concepts or different ideas, but the main aim remains the same: being able to extend your tablet's display to an external monitor. And it is something that cannot even be argued when someone mentions that Samsung is better than Apple in that aspect. And I'm not turning this into a Samsung versus Apple comparison as much as I want to, but what I'm trying to say is Apple could stand to benefit from calming down and focusing on software sometimes rather than just cramming the best hardware into the iPad Pro. And if a way to do something already exists, there is no need to repackage this or reinvent it. If it works, just use it. But on the bright side, it's not all terrible news, as there are some decent alternatives for you to take a look at if you were planning on getting a new iPad this year. These options are going to help you save some time while searching for the right iPad, and more importantly, they will help you save some money. And speaking of saving money, I'm sure shopping for Apple devices all the time burns a hole in your wallet. And I'm pretty sure that it's a little uncomfortable carrying that big, heavy thing in your pants all day.
That's what she said.
That's where Exter comes in. They make amazing, high-quality, compact wallets that are durable, elegant, and very functional. They also have variants with AirTags in case you want to ensure that you can track your wallet all the time. And if you're not an Apple user, they have a tracker card which you can put in your wallet and know where it is at all times. If you're interested in getting any of these wallets, you can shop using the link in the description or using my code TechPHD for a 25% discount. If you hurry, you'll be able to catch them on their fall sales, which will decrease the price of these products even more. All right, and now that I've hooked you up with some much better wallets than what you currently have, let's take a look at some of the better value iPads that you can buy in 2022. So I'm only going to talk about the iPad Pro or iPad Air right now, as the iPad 10 is going to be an entirely different video and an entirely different rant. The M1 iPad Air 5 is a very good option for you to take a look at, as it is sleek, it is light, and it is powerful enough. It also doesn't try to replace your computer with any silly gimmicks. It has Touch ID, it has Stage Manager, if that's something that you're particularly fond of, and it just does everything perfectly. Alternatively, if you're hell-bent on getting an iPad Pro, maybe for the nicer display, then you can take a look at the M1 iPad Pro, which should be considerably cheaper right now. Or if you can get one that is in decent condition secondhand, you're going to save a lot more money. And I know I said we're going to take a look at some alternative iPads, but if you feel like you've had enough of Apple and you want to switch over to the dark side, also known as the Android side, then you won't find a tablet more powerful or more impressive than the Samsung Tab S8 Ultra. I mean, have you seen this thing? It is gigantic, absolutely huge. And the screen is absolutely brilliant. It also comes with its own stylus, the S Pen, included, meaning you save money from having to buy an external stylus. The Tab S8 Ultra isn't perfect, but it doesn't claim to be perfect either. But if you have sworn an oath to never use an Android device, you still want an iPad Pro, and you're on a very low budget, then the 2020 iPad Pro is still there, Or you might even go back a bit further to what is arguably the MVP of all iPad Pros, the greatest iPad Pro ever made, which is the 2018 iPad Pro. Okay, that last one might have been a bit of a joke, but when it comes to comparing the M1 and M2 iPad Pros, I don't think the M2 iPad Pro offers a significant enough increase in value to facilitate the need to buy the new iPad. In fact, I would not really recommend anyone to get the M2 iPad Pro if you're outside the use cases I mentioned earlier. However, there's still more to this story as I still need to rant about the iPad 10. Apple really took an L with this year's iPad lineup, but while you wait for that video, you can catch me in any video in this playlist.
Said we drunk in the spirit, no, we don't stay sober. We don't stay sober. Hey, fly as a jet, but with no layovers. With no layovers.